They painted her body with auction numbers to sell her, but he chose to love her and raise her kids.
The Orvani sprawl had no real sky. Above the upper scaffolds, above the stacked towers of vented metal, the only light came from broken neon signs and corroded ceiling lamps attached to long-forgotten infrastructure. Rainwater dripped constantly, acid-tinted and full of trace metals, hitting steel with a soft ticking rhythm like an old machine running down. The walls were streaked with grime. Plastic tarp canopies fluttered weakly in the wind between beams. The air was heavy with moisture, warmed by machine exhaust and human breath. At the center of a sagging commercial platform in Sector K-17, a crowd had gathered around a makeshift auction slab. The floor was reinforced with rusted braces and mesh, but the tension in the room had nothing to do with structural safety. It had to do with what, or rather who, was standing on display. The alien woman on the slab was tall, her body visibly trembling under the stagnant heat and dozens of staring eyes. Her skin was a soft blue hue, smooth but glistening with humidity. Her long silver-white hair was tangled and damp, clinging to her back in heavy strands. But most notable, most disturbing, were the markings painted directly onto her body. Across her upper right thigh, just below the curve of her hip, a code had been stenciled in stark white paint. Q/12, 74CR. Just beneath her collarbone, slanting across her ribs and partially over her left breast, the label read, Lot 4897B. And between her navel and pelvis, a smaller string of digits had been inked. SVC 3A unclaimed. Each number was crisp, deliberate, and permanent looking, painted with thermoplastic ink that wouldn't wash off for days. The font wasn't decorative. It was utilitarian, scannable, the same type used on freight containers and salvage crates. There was no name, no title, just catalog information. She was an object to them. The wrap she wore offered no dignity. It was a torn strip of translucent polymer mesh, asymmetrical and damp. It clung loosely to one shoulder and dropped diagonally across her chest, exposing most of her right breast and shoulder. Another fragment of the same material hung from her waist, split high on one thigh and barely covering anything between her hips. The fabric was frayed, uneven, water-stained. It had clearly been reused. She had no shoes, only wire bindings loosely coiled around her ankles, digging faint red marks into her skin. She kept her head down, shoulders forward, chin tucked in like she wanted to disappear. But she didn't speak, didn't cry. She stood as still as she could, trying not to show the full extent of her shame. Evan Morrell, standing near the back of the crowd, had not come to buy anything. He had come to trade. A former atmospheric technician, civil sector, not corporate, Evan had spent over a decade on outer-tier colonies regulating climate systems, soil vaporizers, and industrial scrubbers. He had no combat training. He wasn't a soldier. His last job had ended with a layoff and one final piece of salvage, an A9 filter core, still sealed and fully operational. He planned to sell it for enough credits to relocate to the more stable southern quadrants and start again. Instead, he found himself here, on the edge of a human crowd watching a woman being priced. He didn't know why he stopped walking, why he hadn't kept moving toward the trade office. But something about the silence around her, the way she stood there painted and nearly naked, got under his skin in a way nothing had in years. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't begging. And maybe that was the worst part. She'd already surrendered. The auctioneer, a thick-chested man in a scorched vest with synthetic braids tied back around his neck, activated a small control pad and stepped forward. "She's clean," he shouted. "Verified by bioscan. No augmentations, no prior claims. Fully organic. Reproductive viable. Tag code and scan log attached. I have a trade," Evans said, loud enough to interrupt. Heads turned. The auctioneer paused and narrowed his eyes. "Say again." Evan pulled a thermal-wrapped cylinder from inside his coat and held it up. "Atmospheric core," he said. "A9 model. Still factory sealed. No damage. I want her. No one else." A few people in the crowd muttered. Someone chuckled. The auctioneer's brow lifted. He gestured to his assistant, who quickly scanned the core. The display on his wrist lit green. Genuine. You're giving me this for her? The man said, clearly trying to read him. She's unbound. You don't even know her spec. You plan to breed her? No, Evan replied simply. There was a pause. The auctioneer shrugged. Your loss. He tapped a button. The bindings on the woman's ankles released with a metallic click. A low warning tone sounded. One of the handlers shoved her forward, and she stumbled down off the platform, catching herself just before hitting the floor. The sheer wrap fluttered as she moved, exposing more of her hip. The painted numbers caught the auction lights and gleamed. She didn't speak. She didn't even look up. Evan took off his coat. It was gray, waterproof and weather-insulated, heavy enough to be noticeable but light enough to move in. Worn from years in field conditions. He stepped forward and held it out toward her. Put this on, he said. She hesitated. Her eyes finally lifted slowly and met his. They were wide, soft pink irises with tiny white flecks in the center. Eyes that had seen too much and expected nothing. Her hands trembled as she reached out and took the coat. She slid it over her shoulders, pulling it closed across her chest. The hem dropped to her knees. The collar hung loosely around her neck. The coat swallowed her frame, hiding the worst of the markings, but not the knowledge that they were still underneath. She followed him without asking why. They walked for 10 minutes through the sprawl's lower transport access corridors, stepping over stagnant runoff water and ducking beneath low-hanging exhaust pipes. The atmosphere grew quieter the deeper they went, away from the merchant square and toward the sealed parts of the structure no longer patrolled by syndicate runners. When they reached a dry chamber with a locked maintenance door, Evan stopped and keyed in a bypass code from memory. The door slid open slowly with a mechanical sigh, revealing a dim and used side access tunnel filled with equipment crates and emergency lighting strips. He let her in first. When the door sealed shut behind them, she turned to face him. For a moment, she seemed unsure of what to say. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "What?" Evan met her gaze again. He didn't rush the answer. He didn't want to give her a lie. He said, simply and honestly, because no one else did. The storage corridor was quiet, long and used, poorly lit and dry. The overhead strips buzzed faintly with residual power, their glow dull and uneven across the walls. A stack of empty oxygen tanks lay against the far corner. The smell of coolant lingered from a cracked line near the ceiling. But to Evan, it was the safest space he could think of, neutral, hidden, off-grid. No security scans, no merchant patrols, and more importantly, no witnesses. He led her to a recessed storage room connected to the corridor by a manual hatch. Inside was a field cot, a power cell, a wall heater unit, and a stack of survival-grade ration packs. He had set this place up when he first arrived in Orvanes, an emergency fallback in case the trade deal went bad. Now it served another purpose. She hesitated just outside the hatch. Evan turned to her. It's clean, warm, and it locks from inside. She didn't move right away. Her eyes scanned the room, the walls, the floor, his posture. She wasn't afraid of him. Not exactly, but she was waiting for the moment things would shift. The moment he would ask what all the others had asked before. She was used to trades with conditions. There was always a price. When she finally stepped inside, it wasn't trust that brought her forward. It was exhaustion. Her shoulders sagged. The coat hung off her frame, heavy and damp from condensation. She stood near the wall heater, hands tucked into the sleeves, and stared at the floor. Evan moved quietly. He powered the heater to mid-output, checked the cot's integrity, then unwrapped a sealed water canister and set it beside her on a crate. She didn't touch it. He glanced at her, then crouched near the heater's control panel and adjusted the airflow. You can stay here as long as you want. You don't owe me anything. Still, she said nothing. A few long seconds passed. Then softly, it didn't ask my name. He looked up. No. She watched him carefully. Why? Because you didn't offer it. She blinked. That answer seemed to disarm her in a way she hadn't expected. There was no angle, no false kindness, just observation. She took a slow breath and finally said, Talia. He nodded once. Evan. They stood in silence for a while. Eventually, she sat on the cot, moving slowly with guarded motions. The coat slipped from her shoulders slightly, revealing part of the painted code on her collarbone. She noticed it, then pulled the coat closed again. That was when he asked, not out of curiosity, but out of practical need, "Are you injured?" She shook her head once. "Hungry." She nodded. He unwrapped one of the ration packs, opened the seal, and passed it to her without a word. She took it, still avoiding direct eye contact, and began eating with quiet, mechanical motions. While she ate, Evan checked his field pack. He was low on energy cells, but had enough filtration tablets and sealant tape to last a week, maybe more. He could resupply once things calmed down. But for now, staying in place was safest. She finished half the ration and set the rest aside, cradling the heat from the wall unit with her hands. Only then did she speak again. "Why did you use your core?" Evan didn't answer immediately. He sat down on the opposite side of the small room and leaned back against the wall. "I didn't plan to," he said. "I was supposed to trade it for clearance papers in a seed-off world. South Colony. Cleaner air, stable pay. Start over. So why not keep walking?" He thought about that. He'd been asking himself the same question. He looked at her, not at the numbers, not at her legs, not at the way the coat clung to her wet frame, but at her face. At how still it was, how tired, how familiar that looked. "Because when I saw you," he said, "it felt like walking past someone drowning. And I couldn't do that." Her hands tightened around the ration wrapper. "I don't know how to be anything else," she whispered. "They erased everything. My records, my language, even my real name. Talia's just what one of the handlers called me." He didn't reply. There was nothing to fix, nothing to deny. The system she came from wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as designed. That was the horror of it. Talia pulled the coat tighter and rested her head against the wall behind her. Her body was beginning to relax. Not fully, but enough that the tremble in her arms had lessened. A question flickered in her expression. "You're not afraid they'll come looking for me?" "They didn't even record your serial to my ID," Evan said. "They just wanted the core." That was the only thing of value in the room. She gave a dry, humorless exhale. "They didn't see me," she said. "I did." That silenced her again. Later that night, she fell asleep on the cot, curled tightly into herself, still wrapped in his coat. Evan sat near the doorway with a small portable scanner, checking for movement in the upper corridor. None. The area was too dead to matter to anyone else. It was part of the reason he'd chosen it. Out of date, unmapped, forgotten. He watched her breathe. The white numbers were still faintly visible through the gaps in the coat. He wondered how long they'd stay. He wondered how many layers beneath the skin they had burned their way in. But more than anything, he wondered if she would ever believe that someone could touch her without taking. And he told himself he'd never give her a reason to doubt that again. The following morning came without sunlight, only a gradual change in ambient color temperature from the corroded power lines outside, cycling from deep orange to industrial white. The heater still hummed low. The cot creaked softly as Talia shifted under the gray coat, then stilled again. Her breathing was slow, even, not restful, but calmer than the night before. Evan didn't sleep much. He'd kept the portable scanner on all night, watching for unusual thermal movement near the service corridor. Nothing. No signs of surveillance drones or reclaim agents. Still, caution wasn't optional. He moved quietly, heating one of the remaining ration packs over the portable induction plate in the corner. The smell, neutral but warm, filled the small space. Not pleasant, but better than the stagnant scent of oxidized metal and human tension. Talia stirred and sat up slowly, blinking once, eyes adjusting to the pale light. She looked around, as if trying to remember where she was. Then she saw him crouched near the heater, and a faint, uncertain line creased her brow. Her fingers gripped the coat collar as she pulled it closer to her neck. Evan didn't speak. He slid the food packet across the crate toward her and stepped back. No sudden movement, no hovering. He knew enough not to crowd her. She looked at the packet but didn't reach for it. "You didn't touch me," she said, her voice still raw. He looked at her, not startled, just direct. "No, you could have. I won't." Another pause. Then she reached for the food and started eating in small, controlled bites. Evan returned to his scanner and flicked through the power reserve stats. The cell was holding, but they had 3 maybe 4 days max before they needed to change locations. He made a mental note to restock filtration tablets and move his datapad to cold storage to preserve battery. After a few minutes, she asked, "Where will you go next?" He didn't turn. "Haven't decided. Was supposed to be on a transport south by now. So, I'm a delay?" "You're not a delay. You're a choice." That answer silenced her again, but not out of shame this time. Something about the way he said it made her look at him longer than before. She set down the empty food packet. "Can I clean off the markings?" she asked. He stood, walked over to one of the storage crates, opened the lid, and pulled out a sealed med pouch. Inside were cleanser strips, salve, a small container of antiseptic solution, and 2 water packs. He set it all down on the crate beside her. "They're thermoplastic," he said. "We can fade them. It'll take time. I want them gone." "I know." She looked away. "I hate that I remember them more than my real name." Evan didn't press her for that name. He didn't ask what it used to be. If she wanted to share it, she would. Instead, he moved back toward the maintenance alcove and started rigging a small curtain using an old tarp and a bent pipe. It took him 20 minutes, but eventually he fashioned a semi-private space with a light source and enough room to stand and clean up. "I'll wait by the door," he said, nodding toward the setup. "There's soap powder in the side pouch. The water's warm." She stepped toward it without a word, clutching the coat tighter around herself. As she passed him, she paused. "Why are you being this way?" He hesitated. "What way?" "Patient." He met her eyes. They weren't questioning in fear this time. They were studying him like trying to figure out a variable that didn't compute. "Because someone should have been patient with you a long time ago." She stared at him a second longer, then turned and stepped behind the curtain. He stepped out to the corridor, staying close to the hatch but giving her silence. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes scanning the same dead terminal junctions as the day before. It wasn't until he heard the faint sound of water being poured, hesitant, controlled, careful, that he let himself exhale. The first time he'd seen her, she was rigid, frozen, silent. Now she was washing numbers off her skin. The difference was small, but monumental. Inside the alcove, Talia stood under the weak light, her bare feet planted against cold metal floor. The coat was folded on a crate beside her. Her arms and legs bore faint smudges where the numbers had begun to fade. She used the sponge slowly, pressing harder when the paint resisted. It didn't hurt, but it felt wrong, like peeling off a layer of what had been forced onto her. Some of the code smeared, others held, but every mark she erased made her shoulders drop just a little. She was reclaiming space on her own skin. When she finished, she used a cloth to pat dry and slipped the coat back on. Still damp, still vulnerable, but lighter. She stepped out and found Evan still by the door. "You're not going to ask what they did to me," she said. "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't need to know it to treat you like a person." She swallowed. The air felt different then. He didn't step toward her, but his presence filled the silence in a way that didn't push, just steadied it. She leaned her back against the wall beside the heater, crossed her arms, and, after a long pause, whispered, "The first handler told me the numbers made it easier to forget we were people. He said once you price something, it's not a person anymore. It's property." Evan's jaw tightened slightly, but he said nothing. She looked down at her arms. Faded smears were still visible in patches. Not gone, but fading. "What do you see when you look at me now?" she asked. "I see someone sitting in my coat." A short, almost laugh escaped her lips. A breathless sound, caught between disbelief and the tiniest note of relief. "I think I forgot what it felt like not to be watched," she said. "You're not." She looked at him again, long and hard. "You could have left. After I cleaned up. You could still leave." "I could," he said, "but I won't." "Why?" He looked back at her, quiet. "Because I want you to be somewhere where nobody ever puts a number on you again." For the first time, her mouth softened. Not quite a smile, but not pain either. A pause, a flicker of peace. The numbers were almost gone, but the man at the door was still there. And that, maybe, was what she needed more than anything. The third day in hiding started the same as the others, silent, dim, and damp. Talia stood near the heater again, but this time not wrapped in a ball of tension. She was brushing her fingers through her hair, trying to loosen the worst tangles. The coat was still draped over her, but it didn't hang like a shield anymore. It clung. Her frame was lean but curved, still marked faintly by the impression of painted digits, now reduced to shadows of pigment and memory. Evan had offered her space, and she'd taken it. But now, she was beginning to test the edges of it. She'd asked questions that morning, more than before. What do you actually do with atmosphere? How does a weather engineer end up in a slum like this? Have you ever been bonded? That last one caught him off guard. He had just finished recharging the portable heater cell and paused halfway through sealing the panel. No, I haven't, he said. It wasn't something I ever saw as a goal. Talia tilted her head slightly, her damp silver-white hair falling over one eye. Not even once. Nobody tried. Evan set the panel down and sat near the cot, stretching one leg out carefully. One woman. A few years ago, she wasn't interested in anything long-term. Neither was I back then. I think I convinced myself that if I just kept moving, I wouldn't have to carry anyone else's damage alongside my own. Talia didn't speak for a moment. Then, you carried anyway. He nodded once. They sat in the quiet hum of the shelter. The light strips above flickered in intervals now. One of the power converters was degrading. They have to move soon. I'm not bonded, Talia said quietly. Not legally, but I was owned. Temporarily. Transactionally. She didn't explain further. She didn't have to. Evan's gaze didn't drop to her legs, her arms, or her chest. He kept it level, at her face. That seemed to matter to her. There was a long silence, not uncomfortable, but full of something unspoken. Eventually, she asked, "What did the filter core cost you?" He looked up. "Besides your freedom?" She waited. He leaned back slightly, thinking, that core was my ticket off-world. If I'd sold it, I'd be in the South Colony now. Better air, real food, clean shelter, work. You gave all that up for someone you didn't know. Evan looked at her. "I know you now." Talia sat on the edge of the cot. She didn't look away this time. "And what am I to you?" There was the question the audience might have been asking since Chapter 1. Was this a rescue? Was it guilt? Was it pity? He answered without hesitation. "You're not my debt. You're not a burden. You're not something I saved. You're just someone I want to see exist without being afraid." A long pause passed between them. Then, gently, she said, "That sounds like someone who might care." "I do." She didn't cry, but she stood slowly, walked over to him, and sat beside him on the cold floor, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. She didn't say anything more. She didn't have to. Evan stayed still, letting the silence do what words couldn't. Minutes passed. Then she leaned just slightly, her head resting against his arm. "I've never sat beside someone and felt like I wasn't supposed to serve them. You're not serving me." "I know." He shifted, letting her lean into him fully. The coat slipped slightly from her shoulder, exposing one faintly smudged patch of skin where the numbers had once been most visible. They stayed like that a while. Outside, the corridor lights began to pulse red. Emergency protocol signaling a change in sector filtration. The air in Urvanes was about to turn. Evan stood and pulled the portable pack from storage. "We need to relocate. Within the hour. The filtration shift means higher toxin density. Not safe to stay here once pressure drops." Talia stood too. "Where?" "How about a backup shelter? It's not far. Harder to access, but cleaner. Underground. More hiding. For now." She moved quickly. Her steps weren't hesitant anymore. Still quiet, still guarded, but with purpose. Before they exited, she placed one hand on his shoulder. "I'll go wherever you go," she said, her voice low. "Just don't leave me in a place where I become an object again." Evan nodded once. "Never." Then he opened the hatch, and together they stepped into the dead-lit corridor, the first time side by side. Not rescuer and rescued. Just two people breathing the same air and deciding it mattered. The tunnel to the fallback shelter was narrow, built for maintenance drones, not people. Talia walked behind Evan, ducking low where the ceiling dropped. Her bare feet made soft sounds on the damp metal floor. She wore the same coat, now zipped partway, but the weight of it moved differently on her shoulders. Not as if it was borrowed, but as if it was hers now. Evan didn't speak unless necessary. He moved with care, checking vents, listening for motion beyond the pipes. The air had already begun to shift. He could smell the change in ozone density. He pushed faster, finally reaching the old side shaft near a collapsed conveyor belt, then keyed a magnetic strip hidden under a panel. The door opened into a pressurized subchamber. Inside, the second shelter wasn't large, just two small compartments connected by a corridor. But it was insulated, reinforced, and mostly dry. The air smelled cleaner, pulled from a still-functioning filtration pipe above the west wall. There were two mats on the floor, a water heater rigged to a power junction, and boxes of dry rations stacked under a salvaged intake fan. Talia stepped in and looked around. No windows, no lights flickering, no crowd, no codes, just warmth. She turned to him. "This is yours. I found it 2 weeks ago. Took time to seal the breaches." She walked slowly to one of the mats and sat down, her fingers brushing over the padded surface. Then she looked up at him. "I've never been in a place like this where I didn't know what they expected of me." He took off his gear harness and set it aside. "No one expects anything from you here." She tilted her head. "Then why do I feel like I'm still waiting for something?" He paused. "Maybe because you've never been allowed to feel safe long enough to stop waiting." That landed harder than she let on. She turned away slightly, wiping under her eye. He didn't push. He just unpacked a heat blanket, unrolled it near the far wall, and opened 2 ration packets to warm. Later, they sat beside each other on the mat, the heater humming between them. The lights were low, soft, gold tone from the aged backup diodes. Talia had pulled the coat tighter, but now let it fall open slightly, only to her collarbone. She wasn't trying to be seen. She just wasn't hiding anymore. The silence wasn't awkward. It had weight, but it wasn't heavy. She shifted closer, her shoulder brushing his. "Not an accident. I don't understand this," she whispered. "You haven't asked for anything. You didn't touch me when I was sleeping. You gave me your coat. You listened to me. I keep thinking there must be a reason." "There is," he said, keeping his voice low. "I like who you are when you don't feel owned." Her lips parted slightly. She looked at him, really looked. And this time, she didn't look away. "I feel strange," she said, quieter. "Like I want something, but I don't know if it's mine to want." "What is it?" "You." He held her gaze. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," she said. "That's why I want you." No one moved. Then she leaned forward and kissed him, slowly, unsure, not practiced. Her hand trembled against his chest. When he didn't push or grab or take, she kissed him again, longer this time. When she pulled back, her voice shook. "I want this. I want to feel like my body is mine again. And I want to choose you. Not because I'm scared or hungry or trapped, but because I'm here, with you, and no one else is watching." Evan rested his hand gently over hers. "Then let's go slow, and stop whenever you need." She nodded. Once. Her breath hitched as she let go of the coat, letting it slip from her shoulders, revealing smooth skin where numbers had once branded her. She didn't cover herself. She didn't shrink. And for the first time in years, she was seen, not inspected, not priced, not touched like she was being used. They lay down together, not as transaction, not as rescue, but as people, skin to skin, warmth against warmth, rediscovering what it felt like to be chosen and safe. The shelter dimmed without warning. No sound, no warning beeps, just a subtle whine of background power fading, like someone had slowly pulled a cord from the wall and let everything go slack. The heater went first, then the lights, then the low vibration of the filtration pipe above them stopped. Darkness, not pitch black, but dim enough that their breathing became the loudest thing in the room. Talia sat up quickly on the mat, her bare shoulders rising with each breath. The silence had weight now, not peace, alertness. Her eyes moved toward Evan immediately, as if instinct demanded proximity. He had already risen, moving toward the emergency panel by touch, running his palm across the wall to feel for the manual override. "No external surge," he muttered. "This is internal, probably a blown capacitor." She stood beside him, clutching the coat around her waist. "Does that mean they found us?" "No," he said, firmly but calmly. "We have herd access alarms. This is decay. The sector's grid is collapsing. Could be unrelated, but I can't take the risk." Her mouth tightened. Can we survive in here? For a while. But it'll get cold, and the air won't cycle clean. Not for long. Talia looked around. The walls seemed closer now. The room, smaller. The heat was fading already, and the air was starting to taste stale. How long until it becomes dangerous? Hours. Maybe less, depending on outside pressure and how much oxygen the insulation holds. Her voice was quiet. So we wait. Evan looked at her for a moment. No, he said. We adapt. He went to his pack, pulled out 2 thermal blankets, 2 light sticks, and a sealed foil pouch containing oxygen-rich gel packets. He handed one to her. Bite and breathe, just in case. She obeyed without protest, sliding it between her lips and inhaling deeply. It burned slightly going down, metallic and warm. Her body relaxed as her lungs adjusted. She exhaled slowly. He cracked the light sticks, tossing one into the corner to cast a soft amber glow across the room. The second he hung from a pipe joint above the mat. It lit Talia in bands of warm, moving gold. Her skin reflected the light in soft ripples. Her eyes shimmered but stayed steady. He laid the second blanket out on the mat and motioned for her to lie down. She hesitated. You trust me? He asked. I'm scared, she admitted. Not of you, just of being helpless again. You're not helpless. You're choosing this. Choosing to rest. That's different. She looked at the blanket, then at him, and nodded. They lay down together again, closer this time. No gaps, no hesitation. Her back pressed lightly against his chest. His arm slid gently across her middle, not tight, just there, steady, protective. She whispered, if I fall asleep and I wake up alone again, you won't. Promise. I'm not going anywhere. The silence was no longer threatening. It became something else, thicker, yes, but shared. He could feel her heartbeat slow under his hand. She was warm against him, her breathing growing deeper, slower. Then, after what felt like an hour, her voice came again, barely a murmur. Do you ever think this could be more than survival? He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, it already is. She smiled faintly in the dark. Not seen, but felt. Outside, the wind scraped against the sealed hatch. Somewhere in the walls, condensation dripped from cooling pipes. The world beyond their space continued to decay. But here, inside this lightless box, 2 people held each other. Not because they were trapped, but because they wanted to be exactly where they were. 3 weeks later, the world outside hadn't changed much. Orvani's sprawl still pulsed with decay. Vents leaking heat, merchant drones drifting under flickering lights, and scavengers whispering deals in alleys soaked with chemical runoff. But within the old filtration substation near Sector D9, something new had taken root. Evan opened the rusted access panel manually. He disabled the auto-lock system to avoid detection. Inside, the shelter smelled faintly of clean water and warm fabric. The air was breathable again, after he'd spent 3 days rerouting coolant flow from an abandoned hydro unit to power the auxiliary scrubber. It was noisy, but it worked, and Talia was still here. She stood barefoot on the padded mat beneath the central pipe, carefully tying her hair back with a thin cloth strip. Her belly was slightly rounded now, not obvious at first glance, but noticeable in the way her movements had changed. She moved slower. Her steps were more deliberate, protective. She looked up when Evan entered. You're late. I had to barter for vitamins. She smiled faintly and walked to him, placing one hand on his chest. You smell like engine grease. Guy owe me a favor. I fixed his airlock seals. Her other hand slid to her side, resting there naturally, like she finally felt this space was hers too. She looked up at him, violet blue skin glowing faintly in the soft light from the repurposed lantern strips. Her silver-white hair was loose again, still slightly damp from cleaning. She said, softly, I never thought I'd live long enough to see my body change for something I chose. Evan placed his hand over hers. Does it feel real yet? Some mornings I forget. Then I feel a flutter. And I remember. He stepped closer, gently brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingertips lingered, then slid down her jawline. She didn't flinch. I don't see the numbers anymore, he said. They're gone. No, I mean, I don't remember them. Not like I used to. I just see you now. You. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his. Good. I don't ever want to be remembered that way. A long breath passed between them. Later that night, they lay together on the reinforced mat, her head against his shoulder, his hand resting on the curve of her belly. No tension, no silence full of pain, just quiet. She spoke first. Do you ever think about leaving this place? I used to, and now, I think about building something under it. Her eyes met his. Like a life. Exactly like a life. She smiled, small and real. Then we'll need a name. For what? For them. His breath caught. Her eyes softened. I want them to have something of both of us, she said. Not just genes, but warmth. Memory. A name that means they came from a place where no one owned anyone. He kissed her forehead. Then we'll find one. And in that moment, beneath metal and wire, in a forgotten shelter that once held only survival, two people who had never expected to be anything more than invisible were now something permanent. A future, together. It had rained the night before. Real rain. Not runoff or coolant leaks, but condensation drift from the upper turbines that collected on the broken grid plates and fell in soft, rhythmic drops across the outer corridors. The sound filtered all the way down into the shelter, a slow drip that reminded Talia of forgotten forests she had never seen, only heard about in stolen whispers. Today, everything felt still. The heater was on low. The filtration hum was steady. There were no alarms. No boots outside the hatch. No smell of synthetic oil in the vents. It was, for once, just a day. Evan was kneeling near the back wall, repairing a cracked power coupler with a strip of conductive foam. Talia watched him from across the room. She had wrapped herself in a fresh blanket, a soft gray thermal fabric salvage from a crashed evac shuttle, and sat with one hand resting over the small but growing curve of her belly. She didn't speak right away. She just studied him, his posture, his hands, the calm focus he wore when working on something. She realized, in that moment, how safe she felt watching him. When he finished, he stood and stretched his back, then turned and caught her watching. She didn't look away. Is it working? She asked softly. Yeah, he said, walking to her. We got enough power to keep lights and air cycling through the week. Then, she shifted on the mat. There's nothing we have to fix. Nothing we have to run from. Not today. No, he said, his voice lower. Not today. She reached up, took his hand, and pulled him gently down beside her. I want you to touch me, she said, quiet, certain. But not like we're surviving. Not like we're hiding. I want to be with you, like we have time now. Evan didn't answer with words. He leaned forward, brushing his lips to hers in a kiss that was slow and warm, not rushed. His hand moved across her side, feeling the line of her waist beneath the blanket. She slid closer, pressing her body to his without tension, without fear. Her breath deepened as he kissed her neck, and she exhaled softly into his shoulder. The blanket slipped away as she shifted onto her back, drawing him with her. The light above cast soft gold over her skin, bare now, smooth and free of the numbers that had once defined her. Her silver-white hair spilled out beneath her head like a halo across the mat. Her legs shifted apart gently as his hand moved down her thigh, caressing the warm softness of her skin, mapping the place she now owned again. Her hands moved to his shirt, lifting it. She pressed her palms against his chest, tracing the edges of old scars and sun-worn lines. Then she tugged him closer, skin to skin. Their bodies moved together, unhurried, fluid. There was no performance, no struggle for control, just a long breath passed between them as they aligned. Every inch of skin meeting without hesitation. Evan watched her face as he entered her expression open, vulnerable, but grounded in trust. Her fingers locked behind his back, and she arched slightly to meet him. The rhythm was slow, measured. They weren't rushing toward climax. They were building something shared. Her thighs wrapped around him. Her eyes fluttered closed. She moaned softly, not out of pain or submission, but relief, the kind that only comes when there's no one left to prove anything, to no role to perform, just two people choosing closeness because it was right. Evan leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers, breathing with her. Talia whispered his name, twice. The second time, it broke slightly in her throat as her body tensed beneath his, her breath catching, her hands tightening. Her legs pulled him deeper, and her voice, trembling but steady, said, "I want you to stay inside me. Just like this. I want it to last." He nodded, kissing her neck, and held himself still, deep, cradled in her warmth. They stayed like that for a long time, breathing, together. Eventually, their bodies relaxed, her hands loosened around his back, and she turned her head, cheek resting against his arm. Her belly rose and fell with each breath, and his hand returned to it, brushing slowly over the life they'd made. "I didn't know I could feel this full," she said. "Like I'm not missing anything anymore." "You're not," he said softly. They lay there in the quiet that followed, not the silence of survival, but the peace that came after making love on their own terms, in a space that was finally safe enough to hold it. The rain started again outside, but inside, under gold light and wrapped in the warmth of each other, the only thing either of them felt was home.